Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Filmstudy. This is Ken McCusick with a special episode, a short on the tiebreakers for the AFC North. We have an old friend of the show, Dirk Schwenk. Hasn't been on in a while, but good to talk to you again, Dirk.
It's good to be here. It's good to have a Ravens season where we're like winning and doing good things, and we can think about, worry about whether we're going to win the division or such. That's I'm happy about that.
It's a nice spot to be in, and I tell you what, with Lamar Jackson on the sideline, still lying down there for had to be close to a minute. It certainly felt that long, at least. Maybe it was even longer after that tackle by Wilson. It did not feel like we were in a better place.
No, that was terrifying. And in the flip side of that too, you think about what has happened to Cincinnati and the Browns having lost their quarterbacks in the back-to-back weeks against us it felt like a big deal at the time, but that is huge. Huge in the sort of the run out of the last 6 games here.
Enormous. And just today, of course, Joe Flacco signed to the Browns practice squad. Browns fans seem to believe that the trigger finger will be very quick on moving to him. I don't think PJ Walker will be back leading the Browns. The fact that Dorian Thompson-Robinson got the start, I think, signaled the end of his tenure as one of the choices. But Flacco probably will be a practice squad elevation as early as this week and could be the starter perhaps as early as next week, possibly even this week. And it seems a little strange that you sit Dorian Thompson-Robinson down the week after he became the starter. But
and he won.
And he won, yeah. And won an important game versus a divisional rival that the Ravens may wish in the end that he didn't win, but
I know. Well, we almost had a tie in that game. It was tied at 13, 13 all with 4 minutes to go or something. And that would have been talk about the tiebreaker scenario. That would have been the perfect. That's what I was rooting for.
It would have thrown all the tiebreakers into out the window, basically, except for the division record tiebreaker. And that still could have been a problem for the Ravens. So,
yes,
it might have worked out. It might have not.
Okay, maybe. And this is the ridiculous thing about talking about tiebreakers in NFL Week 11, which is, we can talk about tiebreakers if everybody wins out, which nobody can because there's common games here. But essentially, winning is the answer to stupid tiebreaker talk. In November.
Let's not berate our own episode here, Dirk. But we'll have this conversation, and I'll take the flip side of that coin and say that look, you say whatever you want about how stupid it is to talk about tiebreakers early. Tiebreakers matter, and there's no point in wait and see being the answer for every tiebreaker because we can always wait and see till the end of the week 18 games. And then you can just wait to be told who's in the playoffs and not care. This is for the people who do care.
I know. And I do care too. So it was actually a fun exercise to go through this. I was actually just poo-pooing one of my buddies who's a Steelers fan. He was talking tiebreakers and how they had some path to winning. This was, I think, last week before they lost to the Browns. And I was like, come on. But here we are. I'm happy to talk about tiebreakers. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So anyway, first thing to do is we're going to talk about a fairly limited set of tiebreakers here. So we're only talking about division tiebreakers, and we're only talking about 2-way ties because it gets more complex with 3-way ties, and I'm not prepared to have that discussion yet. If it continues, we will have that discussion. And I'm only going to talk about the first 4 tiebreakers at present, which are all very determinable. And want to go through what those are. Let's have that be the first stage. So I know you know these very well, Dirk. You've done all the same research. Take us through those first 4 tiebreakers in order.
All right. So head-to-head win is number 1. And so within the division, that obviously is crucial right now. We've already put the Bengals behind us. We have the Steelers yet to play, so that's undecided. But we lost the first one. The best we can do is go 1-1 with them. Mm-hmm. And Cleveland, we split already. So except for Cincinnati, everything is kind of up in the air with respect to the first category.
Right. And we'll go through these by team. I kind of want to describe what the tiebreakers are. So the division games, that second tiebreaker, right. One that it often comes down to, and one we were just talking about in the production meeting, might have been really flip things around if there'd been a tie in that game.
Yeah, that a tie really throws out divisional records because then everybody has a half less win, and two people have it. And so if you can, the Ravens, for that, all my discussion is from perspective of Ravens. So just book that. But yeah, a half a loss on everybody else is a beautiful thing. And so that would have been perfect. If Steelers and Cleveland had tied right there, to my mind, that would have been a half less win they could possibly get. If we can do our, finish our business, we're going to be set. But right now, Ravens are 3-2 in the division, Browns are 3-2 in the division, and Steelers are 2-1 in the division, and yet have face us and Cincy yet. So.
Right. So the difficulty for the Ravens was they really needed the Steelers to get one additional full loss within the division to regain control of their own destiny kind of against the Steelers.
Right.
So that was a not sure thing to happen. The Steelers have a very easy schedule the rest of the way. So do the Browns for that matter. So, it's not something that you wanted to leave hanging, especially since the Steelers seem to have a Houdini-esque ability to get out of close fourth quarter games.
I agree with you. I mean, obviously Steelers have that knack, and they've got a Hall of Fame coach to prove it, who's done it over and over and against us more times than either you or I wish to think about or count. But I'll say this. I don't know that I agree that the Steelers have a super easy run out here. They do have the Patriots, and the Patriots are terrible and appear to be tanking. So, yes, they have them. But they've got the Colts, Seahawks, and Cardinals. Cardinals look a little, they're bad, but I mean, they look like they have a little more life, and I don't know. But Colts and Seahawks are for real. So they only have. I mean, maybe I'm jumping to common games here too slightly, but they only have wins against, in terms of common opponents. We don't have the Raiders. They've got to win over the Rams, who we face soon. But they've losses to the Niners, Texas, and Jags. And then they've got Cardinals, Colts, and Seahawks to face. So I'm not with you that it's quite as easy as maybe everybody says it is. But that's a real defense, even if their offense is horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that kind of that talk will go for both of those teams. One of my fears is just that Joe Flacco is going to go into play for the Browns and be the great game manager that he was with the Ravens from 08 to 12, for example, or even longer than that, if you want to pick some additional years that the Ravens were good, and be a guy who can guide that team to the playoffs by not making a bunch of big mistakes. He probably cannot do that anymore, but I still have that fear.
I have that. I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid fear. And I mean, we know what Flacco can do. What Flacco was at least in my mind, quite diminished by the time LJ took over. By the while he was on the Jets, his we didn't see any part of that 2012 game breaking chuck the ball sort of Flacco in those years. To me, it wasn't really so much that he lost his physical gifts, but he seemed to lose his ability to see the field sort of in a three-dimensional way, and so he seemed so careful all the time. But could he turn it on for 4 games and be a real trouble to us? Yes, he could.
One of the interesting things was looking at the Browns put out a promo, with Joe Flacco in a Jets uniform and say, Joe Flacco's been officially signed to the Browns practice squad. And I'm thinking, if you really want to evoke Joe Flacco and, trace out your pentagram there in Cleveland for summoning this guy, you might as well put him in a Ravens uniform. I know that has its own problems for Browns fans seeing something like that.
Right.
So they probably wouldn't want that and had to walk a fine line, but it wouldn't shock me if they actually discussed exactly that. Should we show him in a Ravens uniform or should we show him in a Browns uniform? And
They should have had that discussion. I don't know what the right answer is, but it would have been an even bigger gut punch if he was in a Ravens uniform. Now that would have hurt my feelings.
Yeah, well, it would be not what we want. Okay, so we're going to go over for each team what the common opponent tiebreaker is down when we go team by team. Okay. The fourth tiebreaker is then.
I think we're on third, which is common games, or did we already?
Okay, we didn't talk about common opponents. Yes, you're right. We didn't. Okay, so common opponents.
So common opponents, and this is the one we talked a little bit, earlier too. There's so many moving parts in common opponents that if you don't really have a spreadsheet or some sort of calculating machine, and there is. I found one on ESPN, but it didn't work. Like it went to some dead page or something. So So you looked at loss. I don't know what you looked at. You looked at.
I'll explain.
You tell me what you looked at. I looked at actual common opponents, and I'll say here's a little view into the future.
So there are divisional teams have 14 opponents that are common, that are not head to head, and they have 3 uncommon opponents. So if you want to win the common opponent tiebreaker, you need to lose the uncommon opponent tiebreaker, if you want to think of that. So all you really need to look at is those 3 games for the teams that they don't have in common, and you want a worse.
Everybody has the same number of wins.
There you go. So everybody has the same number of wins. You want to lose the common opponent to uncommon opponent tiebreaker, then you win the common opponent tiebreaker.
Assuming you have the same number of wins. Gotcha. All right. Yes. Okay. Now I can understand. I can follow that. Let me go back and let me look at your crazy.
So we'll talk about that for each team, but basically we're going to tell you, part of this is also teaching a little shortcut on how to look at that common opponent tiebreaker, which it appears is very likely to decide the AFC North if there is a tie. Now it might happen otherwise, but it looks like there's a good chance that that's what determines it.
Yeah, we can talk about the other categories too, just a little bit, but this is the one. I would think this is the one.
And then number 4.
So 4 is conference record.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I've got conference record up here right now, but I don't have any comments on that. But strength of victory, I think strength of victory is your
5th.
Your points against, teams you won against. And Ravens are doing great in that category. And strength of schedule, which comes later, all of the AFC North is the top 4 of strength of schedule right now, and Ravens are winning it at the moment. So I'm totally with you. This is common games is where this is going to happen.
All right, so let's go down through each of the teams that the Ravens might tie with. We're going to start with the easiest of all first, which is the Cincinnati Bengals. They've already clinched the head-to-head, so there will be no further discussion of tiebreakers with this group. Any other comments about that, about the likelihood, want to handicap that for me, the likelihood of the Bengals righting their ship somehow, finishing with enough wins to tie the Ravens?
We talked about this. So this is why that Bengals game was so hugely important. So we got that tiebreaker plus a win, and they got a loss. Joe Burrow is now on the sidelines for the season, which is, is a huge loss for that team. He's the most important player on that team, and it's not even close. Mm-hmm. Maybe they can, string together some wins. They got, it's a decent team even without Burrow. Maybe they can string some, but to me, they dropped off the list with that loss. Okay,
well, that's where I am too. And of course, when we're doing a tiebreaker show, it's not all just about opinion, but we can't help handicapping some things as we go. Let's move on now to the Cleveland Browns, who are in pretty damn good position right now. Because the one thing about Cleveland is if they win all their games, they control their own destiny. The Ravens cannot catch them. So that's a uncomfortable position for the Ravens to be in. They need help to win the AFC North.
I saw that. Now, why right now we're both 3-2. Do they not have they played Cincinnati again, right?
Yeah, they play Cincinnati again. They win. We'll get to this as the last thing.
If they beat Cincinnati, then they have it. Okay.
It actually would go down to conference record. So they'll either win it. If they win all the remaining games, they either win the division outright, or even if the Ravens win all their games, then they win it by conference games. And we'll go quickly through those if we're good with that. So they're tied with the Browns in the head-to-head.
Right.
Okay. And they've each got one game, and that's already done. If the Ravens have everything essentially riding on their Week 18 game against the Steelers. So what I did was to look at the tiebreakers basically under the condition that the Ravens win that game. If they lose it, they're likely to lose any tiebreaker to the Browns, but I've been starting kind of with that assumption. So what would that mean? Well, if the Ravens go 4-2 within a division by winning that game, 4-2 would ensure them then no worse than a tie for the division record. And they would actually win it if the Browns lose to Cincinnati in Week 18. Now, there are other combinations that might get it done for the Ravens. They might be able to lose that game, have the Browns lose against Cincinnati, which would have to happen then, and have other combination of games work out. Honestly, those are very, very unlikely relative to the chance of the Ravens winning that Week 18 game and having other Tetris pieces fall into place.
I would much prefer that the Ravens win Week 18 against the Steelers.
Well, I'm
with you.
That's a bold plan, Cotton.
I'm with you. I'm planning to go to that game, and I would very much like to come out with a victory in that game. Yeah, that's without that, it's very difficult. And obviously, I think Browns are distinctly better than Cincinnati right now, and so I'm with you on that aspect of it too.
All right. So anyway, they can against the Browns. The really nice backdoor way to the way to decide it easily early is if the Browns lose to Cincinnati in Week 18. So that could be going on at the same time because those games will be played at the same time as they always do in Week 18. So
those are both night games.
No, they'll be both at the same time of day, usually at 4:00 or possibly at 1:00, depending on how the patterns are in the AFC, but they don't use different times for games because of the risk of teams having scheduling advantages that would give them knowledge early. So
much knowledge, yeah. Or deflate the interest in a game because it's already been,
that's that too. Yeah, good point. Now they also don't want to have no game that can be played at 1:00 because of that. But what they can have is their meaningless non-playoff implication games can be played at 1:00, which really hurts the TV ratings. But they might have to do it. Anyway, they've got that to look forward to. So those games probably will be played almost certainly will be played at the same time. And if you have a Ravens win and a Cincinnati win, you could have the Ravens winning the tiebreaker that way. I think that's actually kind of unlikely. Obviously, if the Browns have something to play for and Cincinnati likely won't, that's when games get really ugly in terms of spreads and likelihood of winning.
Yeah.
And so a high leverage game like that, the Browns probably will not find a way to lose. And we go on to then tiebreaker number 3 in that case. Now, I'm going to explain this one. I hope that's okay, Dirk. And then ask any questions that you will here. But again, the way to figure out a common opponent tiebreaker is to look at the uncommon games. So this is best learned by example. The Ravens have 3 uncommon games from the Browns. So the Ravens' 3 uncommon opponents are Detroit, the LA Chargers, and Miami. So the Browns don't play those teams. The Browns' uncommon opponents are Chicago, Denver, and the New York Jets. Now, incredibly, the Ravens are 1-0 currently in that 3-team group by beating Detroit, which seems like a great thing. Hey, we beat Detroit. For the purposes of this, you'd have rather lost that game because you want to lose this uncommon opponent tiebreaker to win the common opponent tiebreaker. Did I explain that well enough?
You did. No, that makes perfect sense. It made no sense to me when I read your outline, so it makes much better sense now. And looking ahead at the Browns, this is kind of, there's NFL games are never a cakewalk, but their potential here, Chicago, Denver, New Jersey, and the Jets. Mm-hmm. Those aren't exactly dominant teams. Although Denver's been coming on, they're not out of this thing by any stretch. I mean, the Jets aren't out of this entirely either, but they're certainly not dominant teams. So I could see the Browns running that. I mean, the Browns are going to really need to run that, honestly.
That's what I think is if the Browns don't run that, then their chance to lose a game in the standings that's key to the Ravens is pretty high, or even to lose out to the Steelers if they were to lose some of those games. So if those games are not, if one or more of those games at least, if any more than one of those games is a loss for the Browns, I think it would be very bad. And I think it's probably more likely they do sweep. The Ravens have a very good chance to lose to either Miami or the Chargers on the road. The Miami at home, the Chargers on the road. Those are both going to be games where they're probably favored by about 3 points in each one. And
I'd like to say, though, beating the Chargers greatly helps our chances of winning the conference and therefore being the 1 seed. So let's not completely forget where our energy lies.
Yes, and beating Miami, very important for that too, in terms of So anyway, really, really important wins. So anyway, maybe it won't be determined by that. Maybe both teams will end up 3-0. Maybe both teams end up 2-1. If that's the case, then common opponents will be tied, and we'll move down to the next tiebreaker, which is the conference games. And once again, I have to say this, and I know this is something not everybody likes, but we have to look at non-conference games is the easy way to determine who has the better conference record. And you can try and move around the pieces, but you're looking like a parking lot puzzle if you try and do that with the conference games. It's very, very difficult to do. You examine the more limited set of games, which actually determines it, and you look at the non-conference games. The Ravens each team has 5 now this year. You play one division in its entirety, and you play one other, the 17th game of the year, which is determined by playing one other division, one team that finished with the same positioning as you did last year, which in the Ravens case is Detroit. In the Browns case is Chicago. So the non-conference games remain. The Ravens are currently 3-0 in non-conference games. That's bad. They want to lose that tiebreaker, but they have 2 to play. One is San Francisco. The other is the LA Rams. The Browns are 2-1 with 2 to play, one against Chicago and the other against the LA Rams. So, there's obviously no guarantee that they have the same outcome against the Rams, but the Ravens are not in a perfect position, certainly on that, but they do have the more difficult set of opponents remaining in non-conference games, which plays into their hands to.
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
Probable, or to have a good chance to get that tiebreaker tied.
Yeah. Okay. I follow your logic. I dislike anything that requires me to root for losses.
Yeah.
Even in non-conference games. But I can follow your logic.
Right.
And
you still don't root for a loss, but we get to that San Francisco game, which is on Christmas night.
Yeah.
And if it so happens the Ravens already beaten the Rams, it just the San Francisco game will still have meaning for seeding within the conference for whether they're wild card or a division winner, but it may have no meaning for the divisional outcome.
Yeah. Although, so the Cleveland beat the Niners already, so that is a head-to-head, common games opponent. Steelers lost to the Niners. So both of those, these are all common opponents, obviously. So those things are potentially in play. Yeah. Okay. You're the math guy. I'm more of a guy, more on my gut here. I'd have trouble with that. I will note, I'm looking at back in the common games just for a second. Both Cleveland and Baltimore faced the Rams and the Jags, not in back-to-back weeks, but sort of staggered over 3 weeks. Those games those common games potentially are also important. Both things that we have, unknowns, and we're going to get a real chance to look at both Cleveland and the Ravens against those opponents.
Yeah, litmus tests for sure. The Ravens have a lot down the stretch. It's a tough schedule for the Ravens. I don't know about you. I kind of feel good about that in terms of maybe not in terms of their chance of winning the division, in terms of their chances to be really battle hardened when the playoffs begin. I think this is a team that's ready to do some damage.
I agree with that. So the Baltimore has Chargers, Rams, Jags, Niners, Dolphins, and Steelers on the run out here. I think that's all their games. I don't know if I think that's all of them. Chargers, it seems like we ought to be able to. Chargers and Rams, it seems like we ought to be able to push around a little bit. I hope. This is the NFL. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but yeah, for sure, the 49ers, Dolphins, and Steelers as the last 3 games of the season is a tough run. All teams that we expect are going to be all very good and in the hunt. So yeah, if they can come through that, and with 4-2 or something like that, they're going to be a tough out. As long as LJ is standing up, they're going to be a tough out. This is a real defense. This is a real offense. It's maybe the worst special teams we've seen for some period of time, but it's still good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm optimistic in terms of what they bring to the field defensively for the playoffs. And what I like what I've seen defensively out of the Ravens so far is that every team that's playing them seems to be like it's playing them for the first time in terms of not knowing how to deal with a Ravens team that for the first time ever is willing to let you run for some yards, but isn't willing to let you pass.
Yeah.
And it's just very different from Ravens teams historically. And they are shockingly ahead of their all-time records for passing yards per play allowed. They've only allowed 4.18 yards per pass, while at the same time, excluding kneels now, they've averaged allowing 4.5 yards per rush. So it's so inverted. It'd be like having 10% short rates and 2% long rates, or the other way around. Either one.
Yeah. That's a big flip. I mean, and that reflects to the entire makeup of the team, which is to say, when we expected to score 16 points on, field goals from Matt Stover, you couldn't play that way. This is a little bit of a different thing. We can afford to let people try and run for 4 yards, as long as the clock runs.
Yeah, you just it's a lot of it. Yeah, is the proclivity of the Ravens to score is certainly a big deal, and defense gets easier towards the red zone, but also teams make mistakes. So you turn the football over on a long drive, and what the Ravens are basically saying is, go ahead, play your low variance offense, try and get 4 yards of throw, and try and see if you can get some first downs out of that. We'll try and stop you. You have penalties. We'll still probably be able to stop you under those conditions. But if we can't stop you in getting some first downs, you still may turn the ball over to us before you get in the end zone. So it's very difficult to play offense against the Ravens the way they're constituted now.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm happy, and we still we got a few pieces on the sideline right now that may be back for the playoff run too. So
it'd be nice to think that. I'm still hopeful that maybe we get some good news on Mark Andrews, but I'm not holding my breath on it.
No, I don't think so. I try not to look at replays of injuries, but the way he responded did not look good to me.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's finish up here. The Browns then, if they win all their games, basically we go through, they'd still be tied on head-to-head. They would be tied still in terms of division record. They'd actually be tied in terms of common opponent because the Ravens would have to win out and both teams would go 3-0 against their uncommon opponents. And where the Ravens would lose is in the conference record because the Browns would end up one game better in terms of conference record. Unfortunately, that means the Browns have their destiny in their own hands, and the Ravens can't do anything about it if they happen to win out. And of course, they don't play them again.
Yeah, that is the fact. I mean, and this is, not to goof on tiebreakers, but this is the just wins part of the series. All of this washes out if we lose 3 and they win 4. I mean, mm-hmm. They have one more. They've already had their bye, so they've got one more game to play. They've got to win their next game just to tie it, but still, every game is important. All these wins are important. It'd be nice to catch the Chiefs, although we were the 1 seed once before in this era, and that wasn't great.
I don't think we can let that color our judgment here. You want that extra bye week, and we damn well want the AFC Championship game at home.
I agree.
I don't even want to think about that game being played in Kansas City yet again.
No, I agree. Kansas City is a very tough place to play, and how nice was it to see Baltimore really step up and we draw 4 or 5 penalties and some timeouts and things in that Thursday night game.
Yep.
So yeah, that'd be nice.
That was very cool. Okay, so we're done with the Browns. The Browns are in pretty good position against the Ravens, but certainly they have multiple places where they could slip and allow the tiebreaker to be lost. We'll move on to the Steelers here, who are not in as good a position because they're a game behind to start with. The head-to-head is the Steelers' big chance to catch the Ravens. If they win the January game against the Ravens, then they will win the head-to-head and win the tiebreaker, and that is their big hope. If they lose that game, which we'll assume in the rest they do, because we don't even get to those tiebreakers if they don't lose that game, then it becomes more difficult for the Steelers. And it starts by being more difficult for the Steelers because they're 2 games back in the standings. So you've got to somehow play this little parking lot puzzle of games to try and figure out how they can do certain things and still win 2 more games than the Ravens. Yeah, they would have a chance to lose the division record if the Ravens beat them in January still, if they lose either game at Cincinnati. So the Ravens can win the tiebreaker that way against the Steelers if they lose either game. I honestly think that might be the least likely thing of all, is to see this. The Steelers are playing 2 games against Cincinnati. They're going to be high leverage games.
And to lose
Pittsburgh,
to lose one.
Yeah. Could happen.
It could happen. I mean, the Steelers' margin for error is low. I mean, they're an excellent team with a very, very tough defense, great coaching, all the fundamentals, all the mental toughness and fortitude and all that. But, I mean, they cannot reliably score the ball right now. I mean, maybe they can. They turned on their run game a little bit this weekend, and maybe they can follow that up. But they don't look like they can score the ball, and it's hard to be sure. It's hard to have a sure thing if you can't score 15 points.
Yeah, that's certainly true. So anyway, the Steelers could lose the division tiebreaker to the Ravens. As of right now, they cannot win that tiebreaker because they'd win the head-to-head first. So they cannot win that tiebreaker versus the Ravens. Move on to common opponents. Now, the Ravens, again, need to lose the common opponent tiebreaker. 3 different opponents. The Ravens play Detroit, the Chargers, and Miami. They are 1-0 against Detroit. The Steelers are already 2-0 in their common opponent games, with Las Vegas and Green Bay down, and they still play New England. Now, New England's a nice, easy game for Pittsburgh, but if they win it, they run a very high risk of losing the common opponent tiebreaker to the Ravens, even if they happen to make up a game in the standings by the Ravens losing to Miami. So it becomes almost impossible for the Steelers then to catch up.
So we're rooting for Cincy. Steelers lose to Cincy and beat the Patriots. That's what you're telling me.
Are we really rooting for them to beat the Patriots? I don't know about that. I think we might be
rooting for ties.
A tie could do it in this case. In conference games, then the Ravens are currently 3-0 with 2 to play, and the Steelers are currently 2-1 with 2 to play. The Steelers actually have their best chance to win a tiebreaker with the Ravens that is not head-to-head. Their best chance by far is head-to-head, but their second best chance would be in conference games, whereas the Ravens dominate in the chance to win either based on the division record or the common opponents. So it's an interesting batch here, but the Steelers starting a game back, and basically once you get past the head-to-head, I think their chance of beating the Ravens is slim and none, and Slim's out of town for coming back 2 games and having to dodge some of the things that are happening, like not beating New England or beating New England and have the Ravens win out, but still, gain another game on the standings on them in the common opponents. Right. Just does not seem likely.
No. Now that I'm looking at this, it makes me, now you're like, wow, maybe it's too bad Burrows is out. Burrows
he could help
there against the Steelers might have been some help to us. I mean, assuming we secured the win against them in the first round, but yeah.
And so the interesting thing about it is the Steelers, as of right now, also hold their destiny in their own hands versus the Ravens. They do need the Browns to lose either 1 game or 2, and I don't know how many there is, but they need the Browns to be taken out by some other teams because they're done with the Browns. But the Steelers do hold their destiny in their own hands versus the Ravens. If they win out, and that includes the win in Week 18 at Baltimore, there's nothing the Ravens can do to keep them down. And if you go to the message boards of these 2 teams, they're both talking about getting the number 1 seed.
Steelers and Browns?
Yeah, in the
I can tell you from the Steeler fans that I know that they have not given up, not a bit.
Well, very very reasonable, kind of an interesting tiebreaker situation here in terms of what we've got. I think if I had to bet, I think we'll be seeing some January football in Baltimore. Not just that Steelers game, by the way. Hopefully, after that, that they'll actually be playing a home playoff game. But boy, it's awfully important for any chance the Ravens have to get to the Super Bowl to at least play that first game at home, and probably to get no worse than the 2 seed and play 2 games at home.
2 seed would be nice.
And you're guaranteed a wild card game and the second game at home also.
Yeah,
you don't face the Chiefs until the conference championship.
The division winner playing a wild card team first week plays at home no matter what the records are, right? All division winners play at home. All wild cards play on the road. Okay.
Yeah, that's 2 versus 7. And the nice thing about this, by the way, it's different from other sports, is that the NFL automatically reseeds at each level of the playoffs, whereas baseball, for instance, that doesn't happen. They set up the bracket and you play it through from that point. Right. In football, one sits out, 2 plays 7, and then the winners from that first week all go into a group of 4 that are reseeded. So 1 plays the lowest remaining seed, and 2 plays the second lowest remaining seed. So you're guaranteed a home game in that second week. But if you're the 1 seed, you get a chance to play the 7 seed possibly in the second week if they pull an upset. So some good chances. That's a lot to think about. There are a lot of people who will have that same reaction that you just had in listening to this. Thanks for listening, by the way. Really appreciate it always when you do it. I've got a loyal group of listeners, but it's okay to have that reaction. Just understand that there's a lot of other people who really do want to go through the mental gymnastics of figuring out how this tiebreaker is going to play because they go to sleep thinking about it.
I mean, if you're trying to decide where to put money on, Cleveland versus Baltimore right now, this would be not the worst place to, be thinking.
Yeah. So you want to bet on the AFC North winner. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is is a really, really tough call. I mean, I mean, as we established, Cleveland has the tiniest of edges at the moment, and the Steelers are, just the tiniest bit behind. But this is still a race.
Have you looked at the DeVoa playoff odds? The ones that are, I'm just we'll take a quick look at that. The DeVoa playoff odds are always fun to look at.
I meant to go and actually look at playoff odds. I looked at a bunch of percentages and some, like who's going to end up with the first seed and all
that's
those things depending. I didn't look at the DeVoa ones though. I was looking on playoff status, which is sort of a playoff site. But what is that?
That is, it's on FTN. If you look up FTN playoff odds, it'll come up on the page that they send you to there.
Okay.
But I'll just speak to it briefly. The Ravens right now, a 97.3% chance to make the playoffs, a 17.6% chance for the 1 seed, a 25.3% chance for the 2 seed. So that's about 43% that they get one of the 2 seeds that they really, really want to have. Their chance to win the division is only at 61.8% now. That's down some from, I think, 3 weeks ago when this started. Obviously, Cleveland has done some good things during that time, including beating the Ravens, which have reduced that division chance significantly, and also a 35.5% to get the wild card, which is not an insignificant possibility. The big thing the Ravens have going for them is they are the number 1 team, as the former Football Outsiders, now FTN, sees it in the entire NFL. They're very slightly ahead of the 49ers in terms of something they call Dave, which is an adjusted DeVoa that makes them really an outstanding team at this point. Kansas City is behind them. The Eagles are significantly behind them. They don't like the Eagles very much at all with this by play formula. Dallas is behind them. Detroit is behind them. So they do look very good in a kind of in a power ranking that's based on DeVoa.
Right. Yeah, that's the same, more or less the same percentage that I had over here on what I was looking at. That, and definitely the Ravens, so if we have to go to some of the other conference tiebreakers, strength of schedule and strength of opponent and all those kinds of things, Ravens are really, really good shape that way because the AFC North is so tough.
Yeah, you're right. They've beaten good teams in the North, particularly. So if they have to compare to a Jacksonville or something for a strength of victory, they look good there. And they've also beaten the Lions out of conference, who have the best record.
And Philadelphia was a real win too. I mean, that team's done some damage outside of Baltimore.
It was definitely a very, very good win there as well. So anyway, I did want to say the DVOA has, at one point, the Ravens were at 23.4% to win the Super Bowl and were the top likelihood of doing so. They're down to 18.6% now. And part of that is sharing the AFC with Kansas City, Miami, Jacksonville, and now Cleveland in terms of teams that have a reasonable Super Bowl win percentage chance. So even Pittsburgh is at 1.6%.
Yeah, I started looking at Jacksonville for a little bit before I focused down on the division here. But yeah, Jacksonville's in really pretty good shape too. If they can go on a run here, they could compete for the number 1 seed too.
Yeah, it's not just Kansas City. That's absolutely for sure. So certainly something to watch out for. Well, Dirk, always a pleasure to talk football with you, and always pleasure to talk other things with you too. I have fun with that, and tell folks where they can talk football with you online, or maybe read any work you have.
You can find me on Twitter at Dirk Schwenk, all one word, DIRKSCHWENK. I'm a musician and a lawyer and a thinker and chatter on Twitter. So I talk about a lot of different things, including during the season Ravens, which is the most fun part of Twitter for me for sure. But I'm also a lawyer, so you can find, I've got lawyer websites up. I'm also a musician. I've got some of those things up. You can come find me. If you can remember the name Dirk Schwenk, you can find me. I'm the only one in North America.
I'm looking at Dirk's podcast office, whatever it might be, but he's got 4 guitars up and hanging on the wall in the background. So
Johnny Cash records and a law degree where I can point to it. I cannot.
A lot of what you're saying? Green.
I got some Johnny Cash records and a law degree. That's what I got.
Oh, okay. Law degree. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Important stuff.
All right. Wonderful. Well, Dirk, thanks for joining us. Other folks out there who would like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. You know how to do it. Like and subscribe, please. If you're watching this on YouTube, you won't have Dirk's guitars in there. You'll just have a blank logo that you're looking at as you do that. But we appreciate you listening nonetheless. And if you feel so inclined, please write us a review. Always appreciate additional reviews from an incredibly loyal and engaged audience. And I'm always looking forward to hearing from you if you want to drop me a DM on Twitter.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate it. I read you every day. So
well, go out there and write a review, damn it, Dirk.
I know I should. Now I will. I gotta do that. I'll go write a review.
Thanks for joining us again, my friend. And we'll talk to you next time on the Film Study.